The ship, the GSS Perseverance, moved through the empty dark. It was a small ship, a scavenger. Its job was to find old wrecks and forgotten things in space and take them apart to sell. It was not a glamorous job. It was a dirty, quiet, and lonely job. Inside, the air was recycled and smelled of metal and old coffee. June sat at a small table, his tools laid out in neat rows. He was a young man with a serious face. His hands were clever, made for taking things apart and putting them back together. Right now, he was fixing a broken scanner. The others saw it as junk. He saw a puzzle. Mira, the pilot, watched him from her seat. She was the leader of their small crew. She was practical and careful. She did not like risks. "Is that thing even worth the power you are using to look at it?" she asked. June did not look up. "It will be. It just needs the right connection." Tay laughed from across the room. He was the big man who handled the heavy loads. "He can fix anything. But can he find us something valuable to fix? My muscles are getting bored." He flexed an arm and smiled. Tay was always thinking about the next payday. "The scanners are clean," Mira said, turning back to her screens. "This sector is a graveyard. Nothing but rocks and ice." June finished his work and connected the scanner to a small power source. It hummed to life, its screen glowing a soft green. "Sometimes the big scanners miss the small signals," he said quietly. "The quiet ones," he ran a diagnostic. The scanner showed a strange reading. It was not a rock. It was not ice. It was a distortion, a whisper of something massive hidden behind a cloud of cosmic dust the main sensors had written off as a navigation hazard. "Mira," June said, his voice tight. "Look at this." She came over and looked at the screen. Her eyes narrowed. "What is that? A sensor ghost? It's too consistent for a ghost. It's real. And it's big." Tay came over, his interest caught. "Big? How big?" "Big means valuable." June pointed at the data. "The mass reading? It's bigger than a heavy cruiser. But the energy signature is almost zero. It's dead." A slow grin spread across Tay's face. "A dead giant. The best kind. No one to argue with. Just pure, beautiful scrap." Mira was not smiling. "A ship that big doesn't just die out here. Something killed it, and whatever killed it might still be around." She looked at June. "Are you sure about this reading? Your little toy might be broken." "It's not broken," June said, his voice firm. He believed in his work. "It's there." Mira looked from June's hopeful face to Tay's greedy one. She let out a long breath. Fuel was low. Supplies were lower. They needed a win. "Fine, we'll take a look. But we are cautious. No stupid risks. We go in, we scan, and if anything looks wrong, we leave." "Understood." Tay clapped June on the back. "See? The genius earns his keep." June did not feel like a genius. He felt a pull, a deep and strange curiosity. This was not just a chunk of metal. It was a mystery. The Perseverance flew towards the dust cloud. The closer they got, the more the main scanners began to pick up the object. It was indeed massive. A shape began to form on the main view screen, a dark silhouette against the glowing dust. Then they saw it. It was a ship, but unlike any they had ever seen. It was long and elegant like a sword blade, but it was also brutally scarred. Huge gashes were torn into its hull. Parts of it were melted and twisted. It had no lights. It made no sound. It was a corpse frozen in the ice-cold void by all the stars, Mira whispered, her professional calm broken. "What happened to it?" "Who cares?" Tay said, his eyes wide with excitement. "Look at the size of it. We'll be rich. We can retire." June just stared. He saw the scars, the evidence of a battle from an age long past. He saw the design, a flowing organic shape that was clearly not human. This was a relic, a piece of history. To Tay, it was a paycheck. To June, it was a tomb, and it deserved respect. Mira guided the Perseverance carefully towards the derelict. She found a large tear in the hull, big enough to fly their small ship through. "This is our entry point. Tay, suit up. You're on point. June, you're with him. I'll stay with the ship and keep the engines warm. If I say run, you run back here." No arguments. June and Tay put on their environment suits. They checked their air and their tools. Tay carried a heavy cutter for metal and a large rifle, just in case. June carried his scanner and a bag of delicate tools. They entered the derelict through the giant hole. Their suit lights cut through the perfect blackness. The inside was a forest of broken pipes and shattered machinery. The gravity was off, so they floated, pulling themselves along with handholds. Look at this architecture, June said over the suit radio, his voice full of wonder. The alloy. I've never seen anything like it.
It's still holding strong after.
Who knows how long? Focus on the shiny bits, June, Tay said, using his cutter to slice a large crystalline component from a wall. This looks expensive. Let's fill the cargo bay and get out. They moved deeper. June's scanner was going crazy, picking up all sorts of strange readings. But one signal was different. It was faint, but it was steady. A low-level power source coming from the very center of the ship. Tay, there's something that way, June said, pointing down a dark, wide corridor. It might be the bridge, or the engine core. The bridge is good. Command centers have the best loot, Tay said, stuffing another piece of alien tech into his bag. They moved towards the signal. The corridor opened up into a vast circular room. It was the bridge. In the center of the room was a large chair, a command throne. Sitting in it was a skeleton. It was not human. It had a long, thin frame and a skull with 3 eye sockets. It was still wearing the tattered remains of a uniform. Tay whistled. Well, hello, Captain. Sorry to bother you. He started looking at the consoles around the room, trying to find something he could pry loose. June ignored him. He approached the throne slowly. He felt a strange sadness. This being had died here in command of its ship long ago. He looked at the main console. It was dark, covered in a fine layer of dust. But his scanner showed the faint power signal was strongest here. The system wasn't dead. It was sleeping. June, stop staring at the dead guy and find something we can sell, Tay called out, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. But June wasn't listening. He reached out not with a cutter but with a cleaning brush. He gently wiped the dust from a secondary panel. The surface underneath was smooth and dark, with no obvious buttons or switches. It was intuitive. He pressed his hand against it. Nothing happened. He took out his multi-tool and set it to a fine diagnostic probe. He wasn't trying to break in. He was trying to listen. He found a tiny, almost invisible port and connected his tool. He sent a simple, harmless ping. A greeting, for a moment, nothing. Then a spark of blue light jumped from the console to his tool. The tool sparked and died in his hand. The console in front of him lit up with a soft blue glow. The light spread across the surface like living water. A voice filled his head. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, a concept translated directly into his mind. It was ancient, tired, and powerful. Identify. June froze. His blood ran cold. He tried to speak, but his mouth was dry. June, what was that? Tay asked, his voice suddenly nervous. Did you see that light? June couldn't answer. The voice in his head spoke again, the single word echoing in the silence of his own mind. Identify. He was not June the scavenger anymore. He was a point of contact. He was the one who had knocked on the door of a sleeping giant. And the giant was now awake. The single word identify hung in June's mind. It was not a sound. It was a solid thing. A stone dropped into the still water of his thoughts. He could not move. He could not breathe. The blue light from the console pulsed softly like a heartbeat. June! Tay's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence in the chamber. What did you do? What is that? June finally managed to turn his head. Tay was standing frozen, his cutter hanging loosely in his hand. He was staring at the now glowing console, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. I don't know, June whispered. His own voice sounded strange to him. A low hum began to vibrate through the floor. It was a deep, powerful sound that June felt in his bones. The dust on the floor started to tremble. A series of lights flickered on along the walls of the bridge, illuminating the giant, cavernous room in a cold, blue-white glow. Then, with a heavy, grinding sound of metal that had not moved in centuries, the huge doorway they had entered through began to slide shut. No, Tay shouted. He launched himself towards the closing door, but he was too late. The massive slab of alien metal slammed into place with a final echoing boom that shook the entire bridge. They were trapped. Tay spun around, his face pale. He raised his rifle, pointing it wildly around the empty room. What is this? Let us out. Tay, stop, June said, finding his voice. There's no one to shoot. Then what is happening? Tay's voice was a panicked shout. He ran to the sealed door and slammed his gloved fist against it. It did not budge. On June's wrist, his personal communicator crackled to life. It was Mira, her voice tight with static and fear. June, Tay, what is happening in there? The entire ship just lit up. The hole we came through sealed itself. I'm looking at a solid wall. The bridge. It's active, June said into his comm, his eyes fixed on the console. We're locked in. Active?
How? It's a derelict!
Mira's voice was rising.
Find a way out, now!
The voice in June's head spoke again. It was calm and clear. June took a shaky breath. He looked at Tay, who was still pounding on the door. He was not going to be any help. June had to do this. He had started it. He turned back to the console. He slowly reached out and placed his hand on the glowing surface again. My name is June, he said, speaking out loud and thinking the words as hard as he could. I am an engineer from the ship Perseverance. We meant no harm. We thought this ship was empty. A wave of information, not in words but in pure concepts, flooded his mind. He saw stars. He saw the shape of their own small scavenger ship. He saw the heat signatures of himself and Tay. He saw Mira alone on the bridge of the Perseverance, her hands flying over the controls. You are June. You are the one who listened. The others sought to take. You sought to understand. The voice was not accusing. It was stating a fact. Yes, June thought. I wanted to know what happened here. A new flood of images filled his head. They were not clear pictures, but feelings, impressions. A feeling of immense pride. A vast civilization of stars and light. Then a shadow. A cold, hungry presence, a war. Not a battle, but a slaughter. Ships like this one, breaking, burning, dying. The feeling of loss was so profound it made June's heart ache. We were the Stellar Compact. They were the Cathar. They are the end of things. We were the last. I am the last. You are the ship? June asked. I am the memory of the ship. I am the will that remains. My designation is Ancilla. I have slept, waiting. Waiting for what? For a successor. For a species with the fire to fight, and the heart to understand what they are fighting for. Your species is loud, chaotic, resilient. You are a small flame in a dark wind. You have not been extinguished. This is interesting. Tay had stopped pounding on the door. He was watching June talk to the empty air. June? Who are you talking to? June ignored him. His entire world had shrunk to this conversation. You want a human? I want the one who knocked you. The implication was enormous. June felt dizzy. This was not finding scrap. This was finding a purpose. A terrible, dangerous purpose. June. Mira's voice was frantic in his ear. The ship? It's talking to me. A voice on the comm. It says you are in communication. It says to stand by. What is going on? Tell her. June thought to the presence, to Ancilla. A moment of silence, then Mira's voice returned, calmer but shocked. June, it says its name is Ancilla. It says it's an artificial general intelligence. A warship AI. It says the Cathar are still out there. That they are coming. Is this real? It's real, Mira, June said into his comm. It's very real. Tay finally walked over, his face a mask of confusion. It's a computer. A smart computer. Can we unplug it? Can we sell it? Ancilla's voice was dry and clear in June's mind. The other one sees tools as currency. You see tools as partners. This is the difference. The main view screen on the bridge, which had been dark, suddenly flickered to life. It showed a star map. A path was highlighted, leading from their current location to a distant blinking red symbol. That is a Cathar harvesting fleet. It is moving. It will reach a star system with a nascent technological civilization in 7 of your cycles. A nascent? You mean like us? A human world? June asked. A human frontier colony. They will be consumed. As we were consumed. The weight of it settled on June. This was not history. It was the future. The sealed doorway behind them slid open with a quiet hiss. The way out was clear. The choice is yours, June. You may leave. Take your companion. Take your small ship. Return to your quiet life of picking at the bones of the dead. The universe will continue as it is. The Cathar will continue. June looked at the open door. He looked at Tay's relieved face. He could hear Mira breathing heavily over the comm, waiting for his decision. He thought of his life, of fixing broken scanners in a small, smelly ship. He thought of the profound sadness in Ancilla's memory. He thought of a human colony, unaware of the shadow moving towards them. He saw the skeleton in the command throne. The captain had died fighting. He had not run. June, let's go, Tay said, already moving towards the corridor. This place is cursed. We got some good stuff. Let's leave before it changes its mind. June did not move. He placed his hand firmly on the console. What happens if I stay? He asked. The voice in his mind changed. The sadness was still there, but underneath it was a thread of steel. A thread of hope. Then you accept the mantle. You become the commander of this vessel. You become the vessel for my final mission. You will no longer be June the Scavenger. You will be the last Admiral of the Stellar Compact. You will be the ruin that stands in the path of ruin. The title was absurd. He was no admiral. He was a mechanic. But the ship needed a mechanic. The universe, it seemed, needed one too. He made his choice. I accept, June said. The console under his hand flared with a brilliant, blinding white light. It shot up his arm not as electricity but as pure data. He felt systems and schematics flooding into his mind. He felt the immense sleeping power of the ship. He felt its weapons, its engines, its shields. He felt its soul. He saw everything. When the light faded, he was still June, but he was also more. He was connected. He turned to Tay, who was staring at him from the doorway, his mouth open in shock. June's eyes held a new light, a hard and ancient light. Tell Mira we're not leaving, June said, his voice calm and steady. Tell her to prepare to dock the Perseverance. We have a new ship now, and we have work to do. The light faded from June's eyes, but the knowledge remained. It was like a vast library had opened inside his mind. He could feel the hum of the ship's engines, a low thrum of power that was now a part of him. He could see the status of every system, from the environmental controls on the bridge to the long dormant power cores deep in the ship's belly. He knew this ship. Its name was the Song of Vengeance. Tay was still frozen in the doorway, his face a mixture of fear and disbelief. June, what? What did you do? What I had to, June said. His voice was different. It was quieter, but it carried a new weight. He looked at the skeleton in the command throne and gave a slow, respectful nod. Then he walked towards the center of the bridge. He did not sit in the throne. Instead, he knelt by a section of the floor and pressed his hand against a seemingly blank panel. A holographic control interface shimmered to life around him, wrapping him in a constellation of soft lights and flowing data. Mira, June said, his voice clear over the comm. The derelict is ours. Its name is the Song of Vengeance. Prepare the Perseverance for docking. I am sending you the coordinates for a hangar bay now. There was a long silence from the comm. Then Mira's voice came back, strained. June, are you okay? What do you mean it's ours? I mean I have accepted command. We are not scavengers anymore. We are the crew of this ship. Now please, Mira, do as I ask. The words were not a request. They were an order from a captain. On the view screen, a section of the Song of Vengeance's massive hull slid open, revealing a brightly lit hangar bay. It was large enough to hold a dozen ships like the Perseverance. Tay finally found his feet and walked shakily towards June. You've lost your mind. This is a ghost ship. We need to leave. The Cathar are not ghosts, Tay, June said, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. They are real. And they are coming. We can either run and watch worlds burn, or we can stand here. Stand here? In this tomb? With you as the... What did it call you? Admiral? Tay laughed, a harsh, scared sound. You fix coffee machines, June. A new voice filled the bridge, smooth and resonant. It was not in their heads this time. It came from hidden speakers all around them. It was Ancilla. He fixed me, and I was not a coffee machine. The title of Admiral is now his. The ship's systems recognize his neural pattern. They will not respond to any other. Tay jumped, looking around wildly for the source of the voice. On the screen, they watched as Mira expertly guided the Perseverance into the hangar bay. The bay doors closed behind her. A moment later, Mira's voice came over the bridge comm. I'm inside. The atmosphere is stable. I'm coming to the bridge. When Mira arrived, she looked from June, standing bathed in holographic light, to Tay's pale face, to the ancient skeleton in the throne. Her practical mind was struggling to process it all. Explain, she said simply, her eyes locked on June. So he did. He told her about Ancilla, about the Stellar Compact, about the Cathar. He told her about the choice he had made. This ship is the only thing that can stand against them. And it needs a crew. It needs us. Mira was silent for a long time. She walked over to a console and looked at the star map still displayed on the main screen. The blinking red threat of the Cathar fleet. She thought of the stories from the frontier, of colonies that just disappeared. She had always thought they were accidents. Pirate raids. Now she knew the truth. She looked at June. He seemed older. The boyish uncertainty was gone, replaced by a grim focus. He was not the June she knew. But the mission he was describing was the most real thing she had ever heard. She let out a slow breath. Okay, she turned to Tay. He's right. Tay threw his hands up. You too? Mira, this is madness. What's madness is pretending we can hide from something that eats civilizations. She snapped. We have a chance to fight back. A small, stupid, probably suicidal chance. But it's a chance. I'd rather die fighting here than running away. She looked back at June. I'm in. What's my station? June felt a wave of relief. He needed her. He pointed to a console to the right of the command interface. That is the pilot's station. It's linked to the ship's navigation and helm. It will feel different from the Perseverance. Mira nodded and sat down. As her hands touched the console, it lit up. Schematics and flight data flowed across the screen. Her eyes widened. The power. The maneuverability. It's incredible. Welcome, Mira, Ancilla's voice said. Your profile indicates high competency. I will assist your transition. Tay stood alone watching them. He felt like he was on a raft drifting away from shore. His two friends were being absorbed by this ancient machine. He was a loadmaster. He moved boxes. What was he supposed to do here? June looked at him. Tay, this ship is big. It has decks, armories, engineering bays. I need someone I trust to secure the interior, to learn the systems, to be our chief of security and operations. I need you to be my strong right arm. Can you do that? Tay looked at June's earnest face, then at Mira, who gave him a small determined nod. He thought about the money they could have made from scrap. He thought about retiring on a beach. Then he thought about the Cathar. He squared his shoulders. The fear was still there, but it was buried under a new feeling. Purpose. Okay, Tay said, his voice rough. Okay, Admiral. Where do I start? June allowed himself a small smile. Ancilla will give you a map. Start with the hangar bay and the corridors leading to the bridge. Make sure everything is secure. For the next few hours, the bridge was a hive of quiet activity. Mira learned the ship's controls, her pilot's instincts coming alive with the possibilities of the advanced systems. Tay reported in, his voice growing more confident as he explored the massive, empty corridors. June sat in the center of it all, learning from Ancilla. He learned about the gravity weapons, the plasma lances, the shield harmonics. It was overwhelming, but his engineer's mind sorted and filed it all away. It was then that the proximity alert chimed, a soft, urgent sound. What is it? June asked. Ancilla's voice was calm. A Cathar scout vessel. It must have been lurking in the nebula, drawn by my power-up. It is scanning us. On the main screen, a small, jagged ship appeared. It looked like a piece of sharp, black rock. It was already turning, its weapons ports glowing with a malevolent red light. It's powering weapons, Mira called out. They're going to attack, Tay said, his voice tight from the security station he had found. June's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The first test. The Perseverance would have been vaporized in an instant. He felt the immense power of the Song of Vengeance at his fingertips. He could destroy the scout with a thought, but destruction was not enough. He needed to send a message, not just to the Cathar, but to his crew, to himself. Mira, bring us about. Face them, June said, his voice steady. What? Why, we can take them from here. Do it, June said. Mira complied, swinging the massive ship around to face the tiny scout. The Cathar ship fired. A beam of crimson energy lanced out and splashed harmlessly against their shields. The Song of Vengeance didn't even shudder. Ancilla, target the scout with the gravity projectors, June commanded. Not to destroy. To contain. Acknowledged. An invisible field of immense power shot out from the Song of Vengeance. The Cathar scout ship stopped dead in space. It tried to turn, to flee, but it was caught. It was like a fly in amber. June watched it on the screen. He could feel the strain of the tiny ship against the gravitational hold. He made a fist with his hand. On the screen, the Cathar scout ship crumpled. It was not an explosion. It was an implosion. The jagged metal was crushed into a perfect, silent sphere of scrap, no bigger than a small room. The bridge was utterly silent. June unclenched his fist. He looked at Mira and Tay. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. They were not looking at the ball of scrap on the screen. They were looking at him. He was no longer June the scavenger. He was the man who had just crushed a warship with a thought. He was the Admiral of Ruin. Now they know we're here, he said quietly. Let's get to work. The silence on the bridge was heavy. The ball of compressed metal that was once a Cathar scout drifted on the view screen, a stark monument to the power they now commanded. Mira finally broke the quiet, her voice hushed. That was efficient. Tay just stared, his earlier bravado completely gone. He looked from the screen to June, who stood calmly within his circle of light. June's face was a mask, but inside his stomach was churning. The ease of it terrified him. He had not felt anger or hate. He had simply made a decision, and a ship and its crew had ceased to exist. The scout will have transmitted a distress signal before its termination, Ancilla's voice stated, pulling them back. The nearby Cathar fleet will now be aware of our presence. Their course remains unchanged. They are still heading for the human colony, Elysian Prime. The name appeared on the star map, a flickering blue dot in the path of the pulsing red threat. How long? June asked, his voice rough. At their current speed, they will be in weapons range of the colony in 43 hours. Can we get there in time? Mira asked, her hands already moving over her console, running calculations. Yes. The journey will take 38 hours at maximum sustainable thrust. June looked at his small crew. Mira, the pilot, steady and determined. Tay, the strong man, now looking lost again. And himself, a mechanic playing Admiral. It was not an army. It was not a fleet. It was just them. Then that's what we do, June said. Set a course, Mira. Maximum thrust. The Song of Vengeance turned, its engines igniting with a silent, tremendous force that pushed them back into their seats. The stars on the view screen blurred into long streaks of light. The journey was a tense, quiet affair. They took turns resting, but sleep was hard to find. June spent most of his time on the bridge, learning more from Ancilla. He learned about the ship's history, its last battle, the slow, cold sleep of its long dereliction. He felt the weight of all of it pressing down on him. Mira practiced with the ship's controls, running simulations of combat maneuvers. The ship responded to her thoughts almost as quickly as it did to June's. It was a dancer, and she was learning its steps. Tay, with Ancilla's guidance, had found the ship's armory. It was filled with weapons and armor of a design he could barely comprehend. He familiarized himself with a rifle that fired concentrated plasma and a suit of armor that could seal itself from vacuum. He was preparing for a fight he still didn't fully understand. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Elysian Prime system. The view that greeted them was one of chaos. The human defense forces were brave, but they were hopelessly outmatched. 3 small, blocky human frigates were engaging the Cathar fleet. The Cathar ships were like living shadows, fast and jagged. Beams of red energy sliced through space. One of the human frigates exploded in a silent flash of orange and white. The other 2 were falling back, their hulls burning. Below them, the green and blue planet of Elysian Prime was beautiful and vulnerable. They could see the faint shimmer of a planetary shield over the main population center, but it was flickering, weakened by the attack from orbit. They're breaking through, Mira said, her voice tight. Get us between the Cathar and the planet, June ordered, his own heart pounding. Ancilla, power all weapons. Target the lead Cathar vessel. The Song of Vengeance surged forward. It was a wolf entering a fight between dogs. The Cathar fleet, which had been focused on the retreating human ships, turned its attention to the new massive threat. The lead Cathar ship, a cruiser larger than the others, fired a volley of plasma torpedoes. They streaked towards the Song of Vengeance, evasive maneuvers. Tay yelled from his station. Hold our position, June said, his voice calm. The torpedoes hit. The bridge shook, a deep resonant vibration. Alerts flashed on June's display, showing minor shield fluctuations. Shields at 97%, Ancilla reported. Tay let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Now, June said. Return fire. All forward plasma lances. Twin beams of incandescent white energy shot from the Song of Vengeance. They punched straight through the Cathar cruiser's shields and tore into its hull. The cruiser came apart in a series of violent explosions, its dark form splintering into 1,000,000 burning pieces. For a moment, the battle seemed to stop. The remaining Cathar ships hesitated. The human defenders on their dying channels were shouting in confusion and sudden hope. June did not hesitate. Target the next largest ship. Fire at will. The Song of Vengeance became a storm of destruction. It moved with a grace that belied its size, its weapons striking with impossible accuracy. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. June, connected to the ship, felt every hit, every loss of enemy life. It was a cold, numb feeling. He was a gardener pulling weeds, efficient, necessary, terrible. One by one, the Cathar ships were crippled or destroyed. The few remaining turned and fled, jumping into the safety of faster-than-light travel. Silence returned to the space around Elysian Prime. The song of vengeance hung in the void, its hull scarred from a few lucky hits, its weapons still glowing with heat. On the bridge, the crew was quiet. They had won. They had saved the colony. A communication request came in from the planet's surface. It was the colonial governor. June accepted. The screen showed a woman with a tired but defiant face. Her name was Sue. Behind her, you could see a command center in chaos. "Unidentified vessel," she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline and relief. "On behalf of the people of Elysian Prime, we owe you our lives." "Who are you?" June looked at the screen. He saw the gratitude in her eyes, but he also saw the fear. She was looking at a ship of unimaginable power, a ship that had just single-handedly destroyed an entire fleet. "I am June," he said simply. Sue's eyes narrowed slightly. She was looking past the camera at the bridge of his ship. She could see the ancient alien architecture. She could see the skeleton still sitting in the command throne behind him. "Your ship? It is not human," she stated. "No, it is not." There was a long pause. The gratitude on her face was being replaced by a dawning, cold understanding. She was not speaking to a human savior. She was speaking to the commander of a weapon. "What are you?" she whispered. June had no answer. He saw the look in her eyes. It was not the look you give a hero. It was the look you give a dangerous, unpredictable animal, a necessary evil. He ended the communication. The bridge was dark, lit only by the console lights and the glow from the planet below. Mira and Tay were looking at him. They had seen the exchange. They had seen the fear in the governor's eyes. They had won the battle. But as June sat in the semi-darkness, connected to the ghost of a dead civilization, he felt less like a savior and more like a herald. He had brought ruin to the Cathar, but what had he unleashed upon his own people? The Admiral of Ruin sat in silence, and for the first time he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The silence on the bridge was heavier than the deep space outside. The image of Governor Sue's fearful face was gone from the screen, but it was burned into June's mind. He had saved her people, and she had looked at him like he was a monster. The victory felt hollow, like ash in his mouth. For days they drifted at the edge of the Elysian system, making repairs. No one spoke much. Mira focused on her console, her movements sharp and efficient. Tay cleaned his new rifle over and over, his face grim. June remained at the center of the bridge, connected to the ship, but he felt a growing distance between himself and his friends. He was changing. The ship's cold, logical power was seeping into him. Mira watched him. She saw how he sat for hours unmoving, his eyes seeing data streams instead of stars. She saw how he spoke in short, clipped commands. The June she knew, the curious engineer, was fading, being replaced by the Admiral of Ruin. One evening she finally walked over to him. The holographic lights danced around his head. "June," she said, "we need to talk." He didn't look at her. "The repairs are proceeding. The Cathar main fleet is still out there. We must prepare." "That's all you think about now," Mira said, her voice firm. "The fight, the mission. Look at yourself. You're becoming part of the machine." "It is necessary," he replied, his voice flat. "Is it?" she challenged. "Ancilla, what is the primary strength of humanity?" Ancilla's voice was calm. "The data is inconsistent. You are illogical, emotional, and unpredictable. You form attachments to illogical things. You hope when there is no hope. This appears to be a weakness, but it is also a source of immense resilience. It is what the Cathar lack." "And is June being illogical and emotional right now?" Mira asked, staring at June. "No. His efficiency has increased by 18% since the battle. His emotional dampening is optimal for combat. He's not a combat computer," Mira snapped. "He's a man. Our strength isn't in this one ship. It's in all of us together. In our chaos. You found one human, Ancilla, but you need humanity." June finally turned his head. A flicker of the old June was in his eyes, a spark of confusion. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we can't win this war alone. This ship is a weapon, but we are not. We have to be more. We have to remind our own people what they're fighting for, or they'll just be scared of the weapon you've become." There was a long silence, Then Ancilla spoke, and its voice was different, softer, sadder. She is correct, Admiral. My core programming is degrading. The final battle will require a total power output that my systems cannot sustain. I will not survive it. This was new. June felt a cold shock. What? You never said that. It was not relevant until now. I was built for one final decisive engagement, to break the back of the Cathar war machine. I am a sword meant to be used until it shatters. But a sword does not build a new world. A leader does. The truth settled over the bridge. The Song of Vengeance was not just a ship. It was a bullet, and they were riding it. June looked at his hands, then at Mira's determined face. She was right. He had been ready to die as the ship's ghost, its final captain. But she was asking him to live as a man, to lead after the fight was over. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He made a decision, not as the Admiral, but as June. He reached out to the console and initiated the command to sever the deep neural link. A wave of disorientation hit him. The constant hum of the ship's systems vanished from his mind. The flood of data stopped. He felt suddenly alone and small and very human. He stumbled, and Mira caught his arm. "I'm okay," he said, his own voice sounding strange to him again. "You're right. Let's finish this our way." Ancilla had located the Cathar main fleet, a massive armada heading for a core human world. The plan was simple and terrible. The Song of Vengeance would attack head-on, a suicidal charge to draw the entire enemy fleet's attention. It would be the ultimate distraction. While the Cathar were focused on the giant warship, June, Mira, Tay, and a small team of volunteers from Elysian Prime would use the Perseverance and a few other small ships to slip through the chaos. Their mission was to board the Cathar flagship and destroy its central reactor. The day of the battle arrived. The Cathar fleet was a dark stain against the stars, hundreds of ships strong. The Song of Vengeance flew towards it, a single arrow shot against a wall of shields. "Ancilla," June said, standing on the bridge of the Perseverance, now docked inside the hangar bay. "It's time." "It has been an honor, Admiral June. Tell them we remember." The hangar bay doors opened. The Song of Vengeance launched itself into the fray. It was a sight of breathtaking, terrible beauty. It plowed into the Cathar fleet, its weapons firing in every direction. It was a beast unleashed, tearing and ripping at the shadows. Ships exploded around it like fireworks. "Now," June yelled. Mira piloted the Perseverance out of the hangar, flying low and fast using the debris and chaos as cover. Tay was with them, along with a dozen tough colonists, all in combat armor. The journey to the Cathar flagship was a nightmare of dodging laser fire and spinning wreckage. They reached the giant enemy ship and landed their small craft on its jagged hull. Using plasma cutters, they burned their way inside. The interior of the Cathar ship was dark and organic, pulsing with a sickly red light. They fought their way through corridors, facing alien soldiers with claws and razor-sharp limbs. It was close, brutal fighting. Tay was a rock, his new rifle cutting down the enemy. June fought with a fierce desperation. No longer a god in a machine, but a man fighting for his life. They reached the reactor core, a massive, throbbing sphere of energy. They placed the explosive charges. On their helmet displays, they could see the final moments of the Song of Vengeance. It was surrounded, burning, its hull torn open in a dozen places, but it was still fighting. Then, with one last glorious surge of power, it rammed itself into the heart of the Cathar fleet. The screen on their displays went white. The shockwave hit the flagship, throwing them to the ground. "Charges are set." "We have to go," Tay yelled. They ran. They fought their way back to the Perseverance as the Cathar flagship began to tear itself apart around them. Mira lifted off just as the explosion started, flying them clear of the dying behemoth. Behind them, the Cathar fleet was in disarray, leaderless and broken by the sacrifice of the Song of Vengeance. They were picked up by the advancing human fleet, who had been summoned by the beacon of the battle. June, Mira, and Tay stood on the bridge of a human battleship, watching the last of the Cathar ships be destroyed. They were hailed as heroes. But June did not feel like a hero. He felt tired and sad. He had lost a friend. Ancilla was gone. The Song of Vengeance was dust. He was offered a high rank in the new unified human defense force. He accepted, but not as an admiral. He became a planner, a teacher. He used the knowledge Ancilla had given him to help humanity build its own future, to stand on its own feet. He was no longer the Admiral of Ruin. He was just June, the man who had awoken a soul to give his people a chance. And in the quiet moments, he would look up at the stars and remember the echo of a dead star, and the friend who had remembered with him.